let me go ahead and share my screen and we can jump right in. All right, so this is the landing page when you open UMap. I already have an account set up. I think you can set up an account with a couple of different tools. I think maybe Google, maybe GitHub. It just depends on personal preference. Quite frankly, I don't remember what I set my account up with. So up to you. But so let's just start by creating a map. So here, it defaults to Brussels because I think they're French. But we have a toolbar on either side, and we'll just start off from the right side toolbar to upload our data. So the theme for the data that we've gone with for this module is maternal health in New York City. So we're going to start with looking at hospitals in New York City. So I've added my CSV file. This CSV has latitude and longitude. And the layer it's importing in is importing into a new layer. And I will show you why that's important later. But let's go ahead and import that. And we have all of our hospitals now showing up on our map. If you click a single one, you can remove it or edit it. And you'll notice that the name and description is missing here. So that can be an indication that maybe you need to go back to your original data file. And you can see this even better if we go to this C layer tab over here. Every one of our points is just labeled with the name of the CSV file. So if that ever happens, you might want to go back and maybe rename the field that the name of your resource is in. So here we see it's under facility name instead of name. So if we change that, maybe it would work properly. But let's go ahead and add another resource and see how that does. So I'm going to come back over here and choose a community center data set. It recognizes it as a GeoJSON. But here, the layer it imports to that I mentioned earlier, this is where you need to be careful because as it stands right now, if I just hit import, it would override the hospital CSV. So instead, I'm just going to switch that. So it's importing in another new layer and go ahead and import. So right now, the two layers aren't distinguishable. But if we head over to manage layers, we can edit both of these layers. And under shape properties, we'll be able to edit the icon shape, color, and symbol. So let's go ahead and choose a different color for the community centers and change the icon shape too, just to make it a bit more distinct. And what we can also do is change the symbol being used for the hospitals, just to add another dimension of distinction. And they have a lot of really useful default symbols. So let's just go with the traditional cross. And now you can see really distinctly where community centers versus hospitals are. And you could continue to do this, adding, there are a couple of other small data sets as well that we've provided of birth justice centers and I believe daycares. But yeah, once you have everything, all of your data sets uploaded, you can always come down here and change your base map. I'm partial to nice, simple gray base maps. I think they really help the assets pop, and even in Choropleth maps as well. So yeah, and it is rather limited exactly what base maps you have because it's linked directly with OpenStreetMap, but you still have a decent number to choose from. A couple of limitations I do just want to point out with UMap. Theoretically, there's a way to add a legend. I even found instructions for how to do so in German. However, after consulting with someone who actually speaks German, we've decided that those instructions indicate a button that does not seem to be in the version of UMap that loads for me. So that is, if you can figure out how to do that, that is fantastic. I have not figured out how to do that yet, though. And I also am not sure there's a way to change the density of your resources. So obviously the density gets better as you zoom in, but when you zoom back out, it just looks very messy. If you want to have an overview of all of New York City with this level of density. So yeah, those are just a couple of limitations to be aware of, things that you may be able to find resources on troubleshooting, but I personally haven't been able to figure them out myself. But again, there might have just been something I missed. All right, so for ArcGis Online, just so you know, there are a couple of different versions of accounts that you can get. There is the paid version, there is like a free full version, and then there is the just ArcGis Online version. I have the like full free version, so just as a fair warning, my navigation to get to map types might look a little bit different from yours, but you should still have all the same capabilities. But so for the thematic map, I'm just going to start by going to map, and it'll pull me up a default map to just get started right away here. And for this, I'm going to add data on some New York City neighborhood data. It includes some aspects of demographic data and a couple of maternal health measures as well. And if you create this as a hosted feature layer, you can also use it in other ArcGis Online applications. So I'm adding this as a GeoJSON. If it would like to let me. Sorry about this, folks. I did this morning and apparently that was a mistake. Because now it is recognizing the previous iteration that I did. So I'm just going to rename this real quick. All right, and it might take a moment or two to finish loading up. So here we can see all of the neighborhood tabulation areas in New York City. These are neighborhoods designated by the city that are composed of census tracts. So they do align with census tract boundaries to make it pretty easy to crosswalk the two. But we'll just be using the neighborhood designation for now. It's one of these things where it can be useful to have that step up from census tracts, just in case you start running into any issues with HIPAA with health data. All right, so to start, we're going to choose the field that we want to map. And let's go with, since we're talking about maternal health and there's such a large racial health disparity in maternity health in particular, we'll go with a % of people identifying as Black. And I moved my, apologies, I moved my Zoom bar to in a way that blocked that for a moment. All right, so this will go ahead and default to creating this thematic map for us. But we can make a number of changes if we want to. If you go to the bottom of this style options category, you can change the data classification. It provides natural breaks, equal interval, quantile, and you can also do manual breaks. So if you're not completely happy with the breaks it's offering you, if you wanted to kind of inspect your data in QGIS or Geoda before moving on to the web applications. This is also something that will be helpful for other software, is deciding on where your data breaks are going to be before you move to mapping. So if for whatever reason you're happy with your data breaks in QGIS, but they're just not appearing in ArcGis Online, the manual breaks option will be a good option for you, and you can just edit it quite easily. You can select where it rounds the end of each class. And you can even edit it very easily through just moving the slider, just to see very simply what the differences look like. But ArcGis Online does also allow for a bit more flexibility than, as we'll see in MapBox later. So what we can go ahead and do is select the other racial demographic categories and add them. And it will default to a new type of thematic map, this predominant category style. So this will show which self-identified racial category is predominant in each neighborhood. You can set transparency as well. Personally, I think it does look a bit better with the transparency, but that's at least a little bit personal preference on my part. An interesting note here is that while you can change the field names in predominant categories, you don't seem to be able to when you're just mapping a single field. So that's just something to keep in mind, again, when you're still at the data wrangling stage, that, if you're wanting to map a single variable in a thematic map in ArcGis Online, you may not be able to edit how the field name appears once it's been added to the map. Yeah, and we can come over here to see our legend, because when we click off styles, that will disappear, but it'll still be visible over here. We can also change our base map as well. I'm still partial to the light gray. I think it makes all the colors pop, as I said. But yeah, that is the basics for creating a thematic map in ArcGis Online. And let's go ahead and just jump right over to MapBox. So once you log into MapBox, this will be your profile page. And let's go to create a map in Studio. And new style. So we can start from absolute scratch. And just to show you what that looks like, when you start with an entirely blank map and you come over here to components, you'll be able to include all of these different components at the levels and densities that you want to. But that's a bit much for today. So let's head back on over to styles and start with a template. And this is also when I said earlier that it could be used for both kind of simple base maps as well as these interactive thematic maps. This is what I mean. So we can either starting with a blank map or starting with a template, just end up with this really nice, simple base map that can be used in other software. But let's make a Choropleth map. So we'll come over here to data visualization. And if you haven't spent the last few weeks of your life messing with this, you'll need to upload data. But it remembers what I've been doing here. So, and then we'll just make sure that Choropleth is selected as the data visualization type. And it'll show you this map. Now, your initial reaction might be to try and edit your thematic map through this default edit page, and then you won't be able to find any of your data fields. But don't panic. If we come down here to this drop-down menu and move over to Choropleth Fill, here's where we'll be able to deal with that. So let's make the same thematic map we did before with a % self-identified as Black. And so we'll go ahead and clear this value and then style across data range and select our field. And this is where, when I said earlier that starting with QGIS would be a good option, MapBox does not give you the option of, natural breaks versus quantiles. Everything is manual. So add the number of stops that you want, the number of breaks between data. I've added 6, even though I technically want 5. Over here, you can see that these areas for parks, for the airports, aren't showing up in ArcGis Online, but they are showing up in MapBox. So we do want to keep an extra stop just to essentially gray out those areas. So I'm just going to adjust this really quickly. And then so the first stop that I actually want to see, I'll start at 0.01. And then just to gray this out, we can use this eyedropper here, and let's pull this nice neutral gray color from this park over in New Jersey. And then for the rest of these, we're going to hop on over to one of my favorite websites right now, ColorBrewer, which has all of these fantastic options for color schemes for maps. And let's go ahead and go with this one, and we can pull the hex code, although they do also have RGB and CMYK codes. When you would use a CMYK code, I'm not sure, but the hex codes are very easy to use. And I'll just start adding these to the color scheme of my map. All right, and with that, I have a map that I am pretty happy with. Have all the stops that I want. Again, customize your stops by starting with QGIS or Geoda to really best define where your data break should be. We can also actually change this to step so that the colors are not continuous. And from here, I'll be ready to share it. So this is an important part that you'll need for both using it with other software and if you're just trying to host it on your own website. If we go to share, down here in developer resources, you'll see the style URL and access token. Those are going to be the 2 pieces of information that are most important for you to be able to share this. And of course, you'll need to publish it before you do so. But just remembering where those 2 things are is going to be probably the most important bit of being able to share your MapBox thematic map.
Maybe I just wanted to note here too, where the first exercise was points, like asset maps, and then here we have these thematic maps. You could also merge those 2 together. So if you want to have your thematic map and then also have points on top of that, that is also possible. The thing with both ArcGis Online and MapBox. It might be easier to do it that way. I mean, the interaction gets a little bit more tricky potentially. But we just wanted to note that you can also have overlays with these some of the different approaches, but maybe less so on the asset map side, what we saw earlier.
All right, so moving away from our thematic map, we'll head on over to story maps. And again, your navigation might look slightly different, but you should end up on this landing page. There we go. So we'll start with a guided map tour outline. Since that's the center of our, the map tour is kind of like the center of the story map that we'll be talking about here today. So this is a real basic overview of what that map tour kind of like edit dashboard is going to look like. So you can add your media, any of the writing you want, your location. You can also add audio media and a button. This is very useful for incorporating those links to outside resources. So for this, we'll be using a very small data set of birth justice centers in the New York City area. Just something to flag for story map specifically. You'll probably want to keep to a much smaller data set. Just because really once you hit like maybe 10 points of interest on your map tour, that might be the point at which you start losing people. So story maps are maybe a bit more quality over quantity, especially when you're comparing them directly to an asset map. So let's start by uploading an image. So as I said, we'll be using birth justice centers for this data set. And the first one, just to show you all the mechanics, is the Caribbean Women's Health Association. So I'll just go ahead and add their logo, and then edit how it fits. If I can do so quickly. Let's go with that. All right, it's still not fitting great, but that's one of those things that you might just need to take a few minutes to sort out. All right, so let's go ahead and get the rest of this filled in, just so you can see what it'll look like when we move on to starting to look at like how this will all turn out when you actually preview your map and when your users use it. And we can add a button down here with their link. And of course, the location. So they're located in Brooklyn, and we can go ahead and add this to the map. And it'll ask you about the zoom level. Generally, I would personally suggest sticking to the map tour settings. But I will show you in just a minute how you can go about editing those for really the best experience for your users and the most clear experience as well. So if we go over here to edit the base map, we can see that we have this default light gray base map, which is one of my preferred defaults, but we don't have to stick with that default. We can go with this thematic map that we made earlier if we want to. And then we can also adjust our zoom level, because if you go to preview right now with the automatic zoom level, if you first publish the thing and then go to preview with the automatic zoom level, you'll see that it starts from this very wide zoom level, and it's not really zooming in. But if we go back to edit and change to a custom zoom level, let's go with let's go with city. And you can get like really, really fine grain with some of this down to like street level. But for now, we'll stick with city. If we then go into preview with that change, as we scroll, it'll zoom in much nicer. And my laptop's a little bit slow running all of this at once, including Zoom. But so it zooms in so you can really get a sense of where in the city it is. And if your audience is maybe people more familiar with the area, you might want to get even more fine scale with that zoom level. But for people outside of New York, this gives you a pretty good idea of where this Birth Justice Center is. You can see where it is in Brooklyn. A lot of people are more familiar with Manhattan, so you can still see that as well. And it just makes for it makes for an experience that can be really clearly understood from your audience. Yeah, and you can also you can always add additional media as well. This is really helpful because if you're using a thematic base map, unfortunately a limitation here is including the legend. So if you wanted to add media, you could add a second image to this initial image here, and it'll just set up so that your users can, click through a couple of slides. And you could add a legend as a piece of media there. That way they know what it is they're looking at when they see your thematic map. Yeah. Are there any questions on ArcGis Story Map specifically? And if not, we'll move on to StoryMapJS. So this is the landing page for StoryMapJS. It will, when you go to make your story map, ask you to sign in to a Google account. That way it can just, you'll be able to access your maps afterwards. But let's go ahead and start with adding that slide. So just like before, we can add the address, or it'll also use latitude and longitude as well. Story maps are probably the only piece of software that we're going to be going over today where I would say you don't have to worry about geocoding. Anything else you should absolutely geocode to be able to use any other software. So we have added our point. We can upload our media file. And then, of course, our text. And then here's where we can come back to that style URL and access token from MapBox. So this defaults to an OpenStreetMap base map, which can be useful. Certainly, there are definitely uses for OpenStreetMap. But if it's not your personal preference, or if you want to include other data, as we did with ArcGis Online, what you can do here is change the map type. And again, there are a couple other options, but MapBox is the one we've just introduced you to, so we'll go with that. So let me go ahead and make sure this is published so I can pull everything properly. If you don't publish it before pulling your style URL and access token, it won't translate to any other software properly. Although whenever you do make updates to it, it should as long as you publish it, if you are already using it in a different software, it should update automatically. But yeah, so we've just got that base map added. And we can go ahead and preview it. It'll just take a little bit to load. It might zoom in quite a lot. Unlike ArcGis Online, you do have a lot less control over the zoom extent. I will say it does get better as you build out your story map, as it adjusts to like where your points of interest are. It'll kind of a bit inherently understand what zoom extent is required. Yeah, so if you're not happy with your zoom extent, and you're not completed with your StoryMapJS story map, it may just be you need to finish building out, or at least adding your locations for things to appear the way you want them to. But if you are finished with that bit and you're still not happy with the zoom extent, as far as I'm aware, there aren't really options to deal with that, unfortunately. And as I said earlier, you are able to embed this in websites. So if you go to share, it'll have all of your embed and export options at the bottom of the share. All right. All right. So when you land in Tableau Public after making your account, this is the profile page. And we'll just jump right in with create a viz. So again, we'll be using that New York City neighborhood data. And I'll just open that up and hopefully it loads quickly. And if you hit this update now button, you can just preview, I think, about the first 100 lines of data, just to make sure that everything is looking correct and that it's loaded correctly. But with that being done, we can go ahead and open our first sheet. So if you just click sheet 1 at the bottom when you get started, it'll throw you right into your first sheet to start building your dashboard. And it'll take a little while to do so. Although normally not this long. Probably because I've got Zoom running, slowing down my computer a little bit, but any moment now, we should be able to move on. All right, so we're going to be working a bit more backwards than I expected, unless this has finally decided to load, which it still has not. All right. So starting over here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to dump everything that I did previously. So to start, just to get a basic introduction going, let's go back to that thematic map that we were working on earlier. So we are going to, under show me here, you can see all of your options for data visualizations, and down here it'll tell you what exactly you need. So for a map, you need at least one geometry dimension. Another dimension, in this case, will be using NTA name and a measure. So coming over here, I'm just gonna select all three at once using command click, or for some people might be control click, depending on your computer. Then I'm gonna hit the wrong button and have to select them all again. And then we can come over here and create a map, and that'll just load up automatically with the measure that we've chosen. Here you can see its color and NTA name is as a detail right now. So if we click this, we'll see the detail of NTA name as well as the specific number for our measure, percent self-identified as Black. And if we come over to this legend that it generated here, we can transform this into a stepped color scheme. One of the major limitations of Tableau Public that I have not found a workaround yet for is there is no way to change your data breaks. It does seem to default to equal interval, and I have not found a way to fix that. So just be aware of that going into this. And if you do want to do a diverging color scheme, you can always select center here and it'll switch to a diverging color scheme instead of a stepped color scheme. But we don't want that for now, so we'll just keep that there. So again, as I pointed out with MapBox, we do have some of these parks and airports showing up where we don't want them. So let's start by creating a filter for that. Here we can set to exclude the selected values. We'll exclude airports. And we'll exclude all these parks and cemeteries. Thankfully, in this case, they're just neatly grouped by borough. So we can just go through and select those to remove really quickly. And then also Rikers Island ended up in here as well. And there is no data on population for Rikers Island. I assume because theoretically people aren't spending that much time there, despite what actually happens. But we'll remove it from the data set because there is no population data for it. So with those removed, we can then move on to adding another filter. Well, it may not necessarily be, I suppose, useful in this specific circumstance, just so that you get an idea of how you can filter things. Let's add borough name to just drag it into this filter section over here. We can select all, since we're interested in seeing all or any of the boroughs individually, and hit OK. And then if we show filter, it'll appear alongside our legend. And we can edit it so it becomes a drop-down list instead of a select list. And now if we want to just look at the Bronx, it'll just let us look at the Bronx. But let's go back to all. Now, we started with the same thematic map that we've been working on just to kind of introduce to you a little bit more, but let's change it up. Let's make our map of maternal morbidity. So let's drag in severe maternal mortality rate and preterm birth rate as well. And you'll notice that, like NTA name, these are currently showing up as details rather than colors. So let's remove %black for now, and then make severe maternal mortality rate the color scheme. And when you do this, you'll have to edit your legend again, or not. This morning when I was testing to make sure everything was still working smoothly, it changed back to the default legend, but this seems to have retained the stepped legend. So that's nice for us for today. But with that map set up, we can move on to our next measure. So we can create, in addition to that map of maternal morbidity, we can create a couple of bar graphs of racial demographics and some economic circumstance information by neighborhood. So again, we'll want to grab NTA name as well as all of the racial demographic variables and add this into a side-by-side bar graph. And you'll notice airport is showing back up. I'm not going to deal with it right now, but you will have to filter that out. As far as I know, I haven't found an easier workaround. You will have to filter it out for each sheet that you work on. So if you end up with any values like this in your own data, that's just something to be aware of. It's probably worth noting at this point that I did that the airports, the parks, Rikers Island are not in the original data set. I'm actually not entirely certain how they're ending up in Tableau Public, but Tableau Public is recognizing them somehow. And so that's just something to be aware of. If you have areas within your study area that you've removed or left out, they could end up back in. So you do need to look out for that and potentially filter them out. And I put this data set together manually, so not sure how they got in there, aside from Tableau Public recognizing them and filling in the gaps for me. But yeah, so we have very simply created this bar graph here. You can edit the axes if you want to. And of course, as I mentioned, filtering everything out. We probably don't need to go back over the same process for the economic circumstances, but this is an additional bar graph that includes percent poverty, rent burden above 30%, and rent burden above 50% of income. But moving on to the dashboard, let's get rid of all of this and start from a clean slate. So starting with dragging the maternal morbidity map, you can see we have the legend and the filter that we added before. And you can still see the preterm birth rate, the neighborhood name, and of course the actual number for the maternal morbidity rate. But let's add a container below this. And then since we have two bar graphs, we can split this container in half again. And then add our racial demographic data on one and our economic circumstance data on the other. And that seems to have defaulted to an old setting that I had. I'm actually going to remove this filter really quick just so we can see how that's done later. But you'll notice that these two graphs currently look awful because there are a lot of neighborhoods and they're all being jammed in to try and fit in this narrow view. So what we can do is going to fit, set it to fit height instead of fit width. And it'll become actually readable. And if you scroll to the side, you can see the rest of the, if my computer stops trying to make me reload the page, you'll be able to see the rest of the fields. So we can just do that for both. And we have a nice readable set of bar graphs here. All right, so now that we've actually got everything in, although this one, it looks like we're missing a legend. We can see we got the measure names in from the racial demographics, but this one didn't import properly. So if we just select that, we can bring it in. All right. So if we go to dashboard and go to actions, what we can do is we can actually link all three of these so that if you're interested in a specific neighborhood in the maternal morbidity map, you will be presented with that neighborhood's information for the racial demographics and economic circumstances. So we'll hit add an action, filter. So we want the filter to be from the maternal morbidity map. You could do hover or select. We'll do hover for now. And we want it to affect the economic circumstance and racial demographic bar charts. And we'll keep those filtered values. We'll have it done by NTA name. So it'll filter by the name. So whichever neighborhood you're hovering over, we'll bring up that neighborhood on the bar charts. And if we hit OK, once we do that, now you can see it'll bring up the specific racial demographics and economic circumstances here, which is super helpful for both you and for your user. instead of having to scroll through all of the other pieces of data. I will say, in this case, it might be a bit better to use select rather than hover, just because hover isn't leaving any reset. So it's not going back to the original like view of maybe 4 or 5 neighborhoods here. And then you'll notice that the name of the bar charts are changing to display the name of the neighborhood. That is not how it defaults, but it's a change that I had made previously. So here you can see I've titled this bar chart racial demographics by neighborhood, brackets NTA name. So here how I did that is because it's filtering by NTA name for the hover action, I can just select from that insert that little bit of, I think it's HTML. And so what that does is it just, so again, if I insert it actually here, what it should do is you now should get it twice. Yeah. So you can kind of see how that functions. So inserting that command will allow the filter to display the specific neighborhood name when you are looking at just that neighborhood, which is going to be very useful for your users to really understand your dashboard. Yeah, there are a lot of other things you can do with Tableau Public, a lot of other data visualizations you can use, and different actions as well. I've kept it pretty simple here.
So now I think that's enough background, and we'll just go through these quick activities that are going to show. First, I'll show an example of using a template, an existing repository template, and then creating your own version of that and serving it with GitHub Pages. And then Marinia will show a slightly different way of doing that where you're editing locally, and we'll be building on her past example of the and Catherine's past example of the MapBox theme or the MapBox style that we created earlier. So I've prepared this this leaflet asset map repository, and I actually built it off of a really wonderful set of tutorials called Hands-on Data Viz. Whoops, let me go to their actual site quick. That's not it. Here we go. We'll have links to this. I really strongly recommend you check out these hands-on data viz tutorials because they have all kinds of different ways to use free and open source software to different data visualization strategies. So I pulled this one from their leaflet map section about using leaflet maps with CSV data, which is similar to what I think some people might need here. But you can also you can see all these other examples they have too, and they have great steps. So we're really just scratching the surface here. But I built from that a little bit to create this, this template repository here. So as you can tell, there's this index.html file like before. There's also this example.html file. So I'll show that in a second. And then we have some data in this repository. It's some of the example data, this CSV file and this GeoJSON file. And then we have some images, but those are just used for the descriptive README. Those aren't really part of the web map. So from here, if you have a GitHub account, all you need to do is come to this repository, and then it's set up so that you can create it as a repository. So, or as a template, create from it as a template. So here I'm creating a new repository. So I will just put this in as test asset map. So I'm now creating a new repository under my own account here. And, you know, I don't need to worry about a description for now. Say create. So Going back to this this recognition of the URLs, you can see here now, this is under my account name. It's my new name that I used for the repository. And it says generated, it says where we've generated the repository from. And it has all the same content. That's the important thing. So copied all the content over. So now to enable GitHub Pages, we go into the settings, down to this pages section. And there's actually two different ways to do this, but what I'm going to recommend is this one called GitHub Actions. And so we're midway through configuring GitHub Pages. So we choose GitHub Actions and then use the static HTML action. And then this all looks complicated, but I'm just going to ignore it and commit changes and save it basically. So now what I've done is create this workflow that sits in the repository, and anytime there's a change made to some of the one of the files, it's going to rebuild the website. And you can see it's in this pending phase because that workflow is running. But once it's done, we'll be able to find it here. So Mr. Adam, what's that? And what was that? It was test asset. Okay, so this is our, again, publicly served now from the repository. And I'm just going to show the example page here that has some more content in it. And so this is just to get you started if you're following this leaflet example with some other capabilities. And I think that's probably all I should go for now. So yeah, so I'm going to hand it over to Marinia.
So very quickly, so you'll also see kind of, again, all the things we've been chatting about, you're going to be able to see in the module that we have up. In this example, we're basically, so you've been, in the example you just saw, you're working within GitHub on the GitHub website itself, but you can also bring GitHub to you into your specific computer, and there's lots of additional functionalities with that. So here, let's say we're going to create a new repository again. So same idea that, you know, was just talked about by Adam, you know, give it some text. In this case, I'm going to initialize it with the README file to kind of add some more information when I'm ready later on. You can also add a license, learn about the licenses there. So we're going to create that. Okay. And now, so you're going to want to go to GitHub Desktop. So GitHub Desktop is going to be one of the easiest ways without going into the terminal of your computer and doing a lot of code to manage a lot of different things that you're going to be working with. So let's say that we've already downloaded GitHub Desktop. I'm going to bring the code that I see on this website. And right now there's just this README file and the name of this application. I basically just click on this green button that says code, and I'm going to open it with GitHub Desktop. It says, are you sure you want to open it? Yes, I do. So in the background, you see a lot of other stuff of things I've been working on. Don't worry about that for now. It won't look like that on your system. But essentially here, it's telling me, okay, you have this option right here, this map that we just created, or this repository that we just created on GitHub. I've already created a folder on my computer called code where I show, where I store all my different coding projects. So here, that local path is automatically trying to put this repository in my coding folder. On your computer, you can, again, change that to whatever you want to do. So I'm going to hit clone. And now I have the information that I just created on GitHub is now on my specific computer. So here I can, let's say, previously I had, oh no, let's not do it that way. I want to just, let's just look at this in my Finder. So this is it, guys. NYC map to, there's a README file here. I'm going to open up Visual Studio, which is essentially what I use for coding outside of outside of our code. And again, in our module, you can also use Sublime Text, and there's a million other coding editors out there. But in this case, I'm going to just open up what I have here. Yes, I trust the authors because I am the author. So this is what it looks like. I'm going to create a new file. And this new file is going to be called index.html. Okay. I'm going to create this file, and in this file essentially is going to be where I start to add the basics of my my information. So let's say right here, I've got this. Okay. So right here, there's not too much information other than just something here called NYC map, which is the title of my mapping application that I'm going to be creating. Let me just really quickly, I'm going to just drag and drop this index file into my computer. And here I can see that. So here there's actually nothing, but nothing is a good sign because I haven't actually added very much to my map. We can start to get a bit more complicated and, for example, add a MapBox script that is, just drop this right here. And again, for those of you who are not on the coding track, don't worry about this. This is just as an example. Okay. So here I can start to add a little bit more information. Oh, I had my sticky here of my API key. And for those of you who are going to be doing that track, you can get all the information you want from it. But essentially here, I'm creating, I just brought in MapBox into an HTML file for myself. Let's say that's as far as I wanted to go today. If I go back to GitHub Desktop, right here, I'm going to just say, add a comment to my, to what I just did. I'm going to push what I just did back to GitHub. And now if I go back to GitHub and I reload that, I can actually see the index page that I just created. And if I wanted to, I could also go to settings and go to, let's find our pages. No, I think that's in a different section. Sometimes I'll forget. But essentially here, yeah, where'd my GitHub pages go? Let's see here. Oh, there we go, pages. And here, essentially, deploy from a branch. So when I'm in my main, there's basically just one branch right now that I'm working with. So we won't go into details for now, but let's just say we're gonna keep that there. Within a few minutes of just making that one slight update to the map, in a few minutes, all the updates that we just made will be automatically updated on a new page, GitHub page, that I can link to right here. So I'm kind of rushing through this a little bit more than I normally would. But essentially that is, let's see. Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. And if it's in the process of being deployed, it takes a couple seconds for it to pass through. But long story short, this is there are many different ways to work with GitHub. Obviously, if you're going to be pushing and pulling like I just showed you from your own GitHub desktop, you just want to have some time to kind of get familiar with it. But it's a free way of serving your applications, whether or not you're, regardless of the level and detail of your coding.